We live in an environment that's so loused up, it's very difficult to generate good feelings between people because they come from different places with a different value system and different needs. In the society of the future, someone asked me, would everybody be alike in your society? Yes, in certain areas. They will love the earth and take care of it, stick their hands out when they meet another person from a different culture and say, your values are different than mine. I'd like to learn more about your way of thinking. They will be the same in that way. They will be open to new ideas, learn to listen to new ideas, ask relevant questions about ideas. Yes, in those areas, they will be alike.
Hey everyone, here we are with part 2 of the discussion with Simon Michaux and the Venus Project on a transition plan on how to develop new cities that operate from outside the market capitalist economy and its supply chain. And as always, the transition is also a revolution in our social values and our way of thinking. Hope you enjoyed this video and please share it with others. Thank you.
Okay, so after that brief interlude, where you all liked, subscribed, shared, left a comment, and shared this video. Yeah, we were talking about the new sort of monetary system, the new currency system. And Simon, you're describing this two-tiered system, which this is, as you put it earlier, my classroom. This is really like my obsession, is creating that transitional system of how do we work within the existing system to compensate people well, very well, to meet their needs better than the existing system, while enabling them to still interact with the market, buy their crap on Amazon or whatever, and be able to leave and not be stuck in the community. And so basically it's a series of nested currencies. So you need the dollars to leave the system. You need them when you're out of your beautiful ecosystem, or out of your not just your community but the other neighboring communities. Then the next tier is alternative currencies, community currencies, mutual credit systems. It's commitment pooling. You're like, a whole group of people can come together and say, I commit to helping you with this. I commit to helping you with this. I commit to helping you with this. They make an agreement, and this was done informally in the village. And they've brought this onto the blockchain in a very simple way that you can use to create a voucher system where you can create, quote, money. Well, not money. It's a labor voucher. It's a value exchange system out of your own commitments. So you can turn, configuring the nuclear assault reactor, a guitar lesson, work in the garden. You can turn your own commitments and your own value into tradable vouchers. There's just so many ways you can configure currency that aren't money, that aren't a token. Basically creating, he talks about currency as currents that you see. So we're making visible and accounting the flows in society. So a flow of energy, a flow of resources, the flow of XYZ, you could count the commitments. So we're creating these ways to reciprocate people within the system, to make sure that people are meeting their commitments, that they're contributing to the system, that they're meeting their needs, and able to create this local economy, and actually create an economy that allows us to interface with others in our network, where we accept our non-fiat, credit systems, whatever we want to call them, and then also create products that we can sell on the market so that we can continue to allow these systems to function within the existing paradigm.
Game A is the way society is at the moment. Game A is the paradigm and the methods, get up, go to work, work at a job, get money, use that money to buy stuff. It's founded in things like growth, consumption. And the problem starts is when you actually start to discuss what the alternative to Game A might be. You find yourself using the paradigms that made Game A possible.
I think game B comes from game dynamics or game theory, with people like what's his name, Nash, who won the Nobel Prize by basically proving that cooperative game mechanics are actually better for the individual.
Right.
And so go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's been popularized by Schmachtenberger and people like Jordan Hall. There's a whole Game B community out there that's sort of in search of that question, the third attractor, they call it. It's really just sort of a placeholder, kind of a void space that's seeking an answer at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of them don't question, they question the game mechanics, but they don't question the tokens. They don't question how the game is played and how you score points. And
that's Overton window.
Yeah.
They're respecting Overton window.
So slide 70, this is actually the 9th and final step where we complete the rest of the city. We complete construction of the rest of the city.
Roxanne, do you want to talk about this step?
Well, it's kind of a holistic design for a city system that's based on Jacques' work, actually, and combination of Simon also to emphasize the cultural aspects of the city. In this drawing, the hospital is in the center, and then the cultural aspects, the art centers, the music centers, the access centers, where people can go in and take out anything they need and bring it back and return it if they don't want to keep it, like a musical instrument they can keep or whatever. And where people meet and gather, and restaurants, or where people gather and eat, or fitness center or park area where people can walk and run or whatever they want. There'll be
Recreational. Yeah.
Yeah. That, Jacques actually, when he was with me, did 5,500 design sketches. So there are hundreds and hundreds of city systems in the center of the city system. And, I drew from many of them. Then the housing and agriculture. We used to talk about designing 1/8. Jacques used to talk about designing 1/8 of the city and designing it with many different disciplines working together. And when they felt that was adequate, then they reproduce this. So it's very efficient to build and prefabricated in many ways, made in factories, shipped out to sites.
Simon, you want to talk about the industrial hub?
Yeah.
So, right. The industrial hub is where you've got a series of pilot scale industrial demonstration plants where we're prototyping technology, but we're also we're doing all the industrial actions where everything is actually sort of clustered together and like with like, and it's on that spine train line. So the train line goes, with the monorail on top and the shipping container pods underneath, will then go through the whole city in a network, but also goes out to the hub so everyone can get around, but also materials can move around. And so the idea was to actually have them all in like an industrial sector, like in a cluster. And so it's in terms of efficiency, too, the outputs of one industrial plant will be needed elsewhere. That plant will be right next door to it. Shrink the value chain down so we have all the steps, as many steps as possible, are in one place. The metric I'm trying to hit here is to take the just-in-time supply grid across 6 continents and shrink it down to one shed for some products. I'm not kidding, Arjang. There is actually a way to do that in some respects. A series of strategically important devices, like say an electric motor.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah,
we're going to make an electric
like a
motor.
computer.
So the electric motor, it comes out one end of the shed, and everything needed goes in that shed from a raw material point of view. So this is actually the equivalent of, say, a suburb in a city. At 10,000 people. Yeah.
Can you explain how in your industrial plant, it's more like a circular society in terms of the waste? And because that was really fascinating, the waste in one industry going to the other and what that might be particularly.
We actually just cut out 50 slides, so this is why things are a little distorted. So, all right. So with the idea of an industrial site, a process plant, raw material goes in one end, and whatever it's producing or separating comes out the other. And you've got a finished product, but you've also got waste streams. For example, a smelter, you get, say, iron ore goes in one end, and you get metal pig iron ingots come out the other, but you also get slag. What if we were to take the pig iron and then pass it on to the next plant that could use it? But the slag, normally they just dump the slag and they say, yeah, it's a stockpile, it's a waste product, whatever. What if we were to turn that waste product, and if we were to sort of process it a few more times, separate out into its basic components, and use the components in it? For example, strip out have another system that strips all the metal out, like a form of mining, and with the mineralized stuff that's left over, use it for road sealing applications. If there's no metal left in it anymore, that won't cause acid mine drainage. Right, and so the idea was actually sort of have a series of industrial sites together. For example, we want to take rubber tires at mine sites. Like you got big mining trucks, and the tires on these mining trucks are like 4 or 5 meters in diameter. They're huge. And when they wear out, they just dump them, and they don't know what to do. Go out to that mine site, and in a mobile plant, pick them up, cut them up, and shred them. Take the shredded rubber to our site, our city, put them into a pyrolysis plant. In heating without oxygen. That rubber breaks down into a fuel oil. A few distillation steps later, you've got a substitute for diesel. Use that diesel to build the city. So that's actually the fuel source to run all the construction equipment to build the city, until we get to the point where we don't need to do that anymore. In the same plant, you'll have metal scrap coming out of it, so that's a source of steel, but we also get enormous amounts of carbon black. And normally the carbon black, now they're not quite sure what to do with it. But what if we use that carbon black to create graphene? Hold the phone. Graphene? What? So now we're actually going to be making high-tech engineering products from a waste stream.
So Simon, on these collections of spent tires, now these encompass like miles of coverage, these dump sites.
Yeah.
Right? Like
They're
in some
large,
cases,
and no one knows what to do with them.
right. In some cases, they're just burning them. It's just
They're not
smoke going
supposed
up
to,
into
but
the air.
yes. Bastards.
Yeah.
They're seen from outer space, from satellites.
So these things are
How
so
many
large.
they are.
Mine sites like, say, the Escondida mine in Chile is so large. They're running so many trucks and they're dumping so many of these tires that like every day they're putting more on the stockpile, and it's been going now for decades. Put it this way, we're going to take that pile of waste rubber tires and turn it into a city.
What people don't often think about is they might question, well, there's cheaper alternatives out there for these kinds of products, like we can get them from cheaper places. But what should also be considered is, other than like economies of scale, the fact that what we're doing is reversing the externalities of the existing industrial processes, right? So the value added, so to speak, is the fact that we're undoing the externalities by transforming these waste streams into useful products. So,
well, it brings us into the question of cost. Like, what is the true cost of all the things that we're doing? PFAS have made about $42 billion or something, but the cost to remove PFAS is greater than the entire GDP of the whole world economy, $12 trillion or something. So we're not factoring in the true cost. PFAS are polyfluorocarbons or whatever. They're like microplastic. No, they're microplastic. They're forever chemicals. But yeah, basically that the entire way that we make our cost benefit analysis and do accounting generally is, again, like you said, Arjang, based on market efficiency. It's more, quote, efficient to send things across the world where you can pay people slave wages to do things, rather than thinking that, the emissions you're burning to transport it across there are going to stay into the environment and we're going to have to get them out. It's like, this is at the heart of it, the governance and then the accounting system, not just currency, because that's the kind of game mechanic. We think about, economy as just this sort of meta game that's overlaid on reality of like how people compete for resources, when that's not really economy. Economy is a management of the household, and accounting is tremendously important.
Roxanne, the guy that approached us with $5 billion in garbage, right? He either owned or perhaps had access to landfills. Maybe we should have kept in contact.
A machine to turn that into something valuable. Yeah.
I'm just letting you know, Simon, this is all going to have to be condensed into a TikTok or society is going to end.
So the plan
Just play it really fast.
The plan is
People want a 1-minute video. That's all they care about.
This is actually the stuff that to actually implement the many ideas that are being discussed by all these groups and then turn them into a practical plan on the ground. I would like someone of the caliber of Daniel Schmachtenberger to run that. Right, and what I would do is I would give him a game theory laboratory as a tool to work out and test different simulations and different ideas over a 500-year time frame, as well as look at historical stuff about why it went wrong and where.
Just to reflect on that, it's the synthesis. I mean, that's always going to be the key word. It's that new science of interdisciplinary, holistic perspectives and sort of bringing them together in council instead of being like, here's the one solution. And a lot of the people in the world who are trying to solve the problem or a problem, they have their one solution. You need the industrial transformation, you need the game theoretics, you need the governance, you need the ecological restoration. None of them is sufficient on their own. And this is really where a lot of our movements are falling apart, and where we need to create systems between them, very simply creating feedback loops and councils, bringing together these different perspectives.
So in a city of 10,000 people, which is the equivalent of a very, very small town, right, we're going to implement a society, which means you need a practical outcome. You've now got to make some decisions now. You've got 1,000 options in front of you. You've got to make a decision of what you actually do. Like, how do we actually build a multi-billion-dollar city with multiple industrial hubs in it, and systems like a nuclear reactor, without using existing industrial systems like capital controls or corporate structure? So my mandate is to use the tools of this world to build the next world. One of the things I want to do is change what money is for. I want a situation where everyone living in the city is paid with two kinds of value. The first one is what I call Tier 1, society's necessities. This is a resource management system that allows all citizens access to the basic necessities of living: food, shelter, power, drinking water, sewage, sanitation, education, healthcare. It's just accessible. It's just like you have access as a consequence of living in the city. This little city, this tiny little seed in a city has got to interact with the outside world. Also, to attract professionals, people who know what they're doing, people like us who actually have careers in this existing system. They're not going to come anywhere near the city if they've got to do it in a way where they destroy their existing career. So they've got to be paid money in their conventional terms so they can store wealth and interact with the outside world while the outside world is the way it is. I'm living here in Helsinki, and the vast majority of my wage is actually taken up with the necessities of life. Most of the time, I'm moving at a forced march level to try and sort of put food on the table, pay the rent. I've got to pay the electricity bill. This is actually the quality of life stuff. What if we took that off the table? That now happens some other way. Now, instead of saying, oh, the government will do it, the government's funded by taxes. And there's an arm wrestle between what is tax and what's my money, and there's a resentment there. What if that whole system happened in a completely parallel system that I had nothing to do with? Right, we're changing the paradigm of where the necessities of life come from. I could, for example, not get any conventional money at all, and I'll still be able to live just fine. That's the society you want to build there. So the idea is to actually use the game theory lab to actually sort of work out how this will work.
Now, I want to just say one thing, Simon. Let me know what you think about this. I've always said this when people are asking me about the transition and how we can move to a new society. Like, would the hypothetical scenario of that miniature city of 10,000 people work something like this eventually in the intermediary sense, where are people within that system working to develop the building blocks and the technology and the innovation hub, as you talked about? And then within that model, they don't really exchange money with each other. But then since they want to also work with the outside world, they have their own jobs, right? They make the money from the outside world. Then they use that money to buy the materials needed to insert back into their system. Is that some kind of like the hybrid thing?
Sort of. Also, what I'm trying to do here is Tier 1 is all the necessities, all the things that you need
Universal
to live.
basic services.
But there's a lot of luxuries. Yeah, but there's also lots of stuff that we actually want to have. So you were saying like the bullshit of Amazon. Well, like stuff like this is not but also in our city we've got things like coffee shops, hairdressers. So the idea is to have a conventional free market economy on some things in the city, but the some things are all things that are not mission critical.
Yeah.
Right.
The end goal is to get away from that altogether. The end goal is to get away.
Yes, but we've got to do it in stages. Because one of the things that is very apparent to me is the way we are at the moment. Society is being pineappled by a whole series of problems that are actually coming from a small group of people being assholes. So we've got to develop a new system, an entirely new system, but then society's got to trust it to the point where it can do away with the old system completely. And so if we have so we're going to start out as a private organization with a job to do. When a mine starts a mine site, like a mining corporation, you go out to the middle of where it builds a mining village. People who work in the mine site, they turn up. Here's your place to live. Here's your desk, and everything's needed, right? Everything's accessed, and get to work. Here's your money, and then you do whatever you want with that money. There comes a point when we morph into a new kind of society, but there's also a point when we've got to manage all those resources. We've got to manage, for example, what happens if one person is using 100 times the electricity of an ordinary person? Or what happens when, say, someone is eating 100 times the food allocation of someone else? As I say, is we need to track resources, and this is the resource tracking system that we can talk about that. But if we can get to the point where society can understand that what we have money, like the necessities of society are there, and everything is there. We're not in a society where anyone has to fight for their own survival, and they don't have to do things like steal for food, which is our current society has created these situations which are quite scary and toxic if you happen to be in them. Get to the point where society can trust it over time. And so we're in the city, we've got access to power, we've got access to basic food, we've got access to water. That's all done. Here's my money. I'm going to go buy a cappuccino and sit at the coffee shop in the local garden. I'm then going to use some of my money and I'm going to buy some chocolate or whatever. And this is the free. So you got what I'm talking about here is a dynamic that we're eventually going to get to for top-down management of resources. Let's call it a form of socialism. We've got to agree to actually work with what resources we have, and we've got to actually share them in a way where we don't turn on each other. So top-down resources management, bottom up, free market mechanics of what we do with those resources.
Well, to sort of counter that
So
scary buzzword of socialism for a lot of people, there is a rich tradition of libertarian socialism, which sounds like a contradiction to many people, but it's like, you have a system that's pro-social, that's oriented toward meeting the needs of all people, that has some form of administrative capacity, that it's not just people doing their own thing, but it's also libertarian, it's non-authoritarian. I mean, this is basically anarchism at its core. And the Spanish Civil War is a great short-lived experiment of this, where factories were still creating goods, trains were still running. They took the Ritz-Carlton and they made it. They just still made food, and just anybody could come and have it. And the hotel above was a hospital, but people showed up to work, and the trade unions came together, and this was the anarcho-syndicalism. They came together and they coordinated about resource flows. So there is a sort of a body, like an administrative, not necessarily bureaucratic body, that helps with those, economic planning, but it's also ultimately bottom up. And this is functioning beautifully in Rojava right now, where they have a system of councils that goes from the neighborhood council to the local council to the town council, all the way up to a sort of administrative body that's like it's not really a state. It's like a governance body, but it's not a state. It's not like, this is what you get, we tell you what you get. It's like it answers to the bottom up.
It's a feedback mechanism. It's a social feedback mechanism.
So we're moving into an era of resource scarcity. The whole premise behind the degrowth movement and the whole limits to growth report show that the way we were doing things before is about to hit limits or a series of difficulties where it's going to become harder and harder and harder to operate like we were. Now, we either choose to collaboratively manage those resources in a way where we share, or it's give war a chance and we turn on each other. And if everyone understands that we now have to change the way we do things now. We'll call it communal, call it whatever you want. That's what I'm saying. Form a new ism, an entirely new ism that uses elements of all existing systems in some form. And I like the idea of collectively managing resources, but using free market mechanics to decide what we do with those resources within the limits that we agree upon. And we all agree that if we've got to agree on those limits, or we move into an era of conflict. Do we grow up or
I
not?
want to kind of hyperlink the episode we did at the Liminal Village, which deals with so many of these ideas and principles and puts them into practice at a small village scale. But we talked at length with Roberto Valenti, who's the founder of that beautiful space and a brilliant computer scientist working toward a resource-based economy, about his vision of as what he calls a demand-driven, needs-based economy. And so it's like the market system where it's decentralized, but the market system starts with supply. You just create a whole bunch of shit and you hope somebody buys it. Whereas we're starting with need. We're actually able to account for needs, and we're sort of able to invert that market where if you meet more people's needs, more resources and energy flows your way so that you're better able to meet them. So it takes the best of both worlds, where we're not just doing it chaotically. It's not about self-interest. It's not about I can fuck you over and get profit out of it. It's like if you're meeting a lot of needs in society and providing genuine value, and the basis of the economy starts not at supply, but it starts at what do we need, how much do we need, and we're freely giving that information up, and accounting for that. Each family says we eat this much potatoes, we eat this much beef, we eat this much turnips, we use this much energy, and they're able to sort of give that feedback into a system, and then we can create basically information systems, cybernetic systems, AI systems, to make sense of that data, to basically allow for a participatory planned system.
Yeah, so you also need at the heart of it, a community where we've got to decide what kind of society we want to live in, and that's actually what's going to sort of be the life force behind all this. Here in Finland, in Helsinki, they got all the people who were homeless and were sleeping on the street, and they said, "All right, come with us," and they actually put them in housing, and they gave them counselling, because a lot of them were there for mental health issues as well as financial problems, and helped them get on their feet. And it came to because the people of Helsinki didn't like a situation where people were sleeping rough, because people can freeze to death in the winter. And they said that's not the kind of society we want, so we're going to do something about
Nate,
it.
can you or Roxanne explain functional selfishness?
Yeah, and that's a term that Fresco would use a lot to sort of describe maybe the basis for your participation in a system where you're not just trying to be extractive and sort of a defector in the game, but you're trying to play the long game and participate over time. More of a long-term, wise application of your time and effort, because you're trying to contribute to a system that gives back to you. So you think of it as like a reciprocity or a symbiosis that you have with other people and the system. So he would refer to that as functional selfishness, where it's not just what's in it for me. It's about, well, at the end of the day, I have to give a lot to the system, and I have to participate in the system a certain way in order for my lifestyle and my well-being to be optimized, as well as everybody else. So it's kind of along those lines. Roxanne, you might have something to add.
Kind of a little example of that is that you want to see people educated. You want to educate as many people as possible to their highest potential, because if they contribute to society and they develop something, it goes right back into the access center where everybody can use it free of charge. So you try and encourage, the growth and the education and the intellect of the whole system as a whole, because you will get benefit from that, just like everybody else will.
So you're ultimately trying to arrange the incentives and the the reasons for people's participation to harness their self-interest, but in a pro-social, a socially productive way.
So getting those homeless people off the street is good for you, because it's like those people are now contributing to your society. And I think what was his name? Oscar Wilde said, like, I want to end poverty because I don't like looking at it. And it's also a public health thing. It's like, those people are a danger to society. When people's needs are unmet in society, they're a danger. And the better educated your kids are, the happier we're all going to be. And if we don't realize that, like you're saying, Simon, that we're all in it together. And I think it's beyond an ism. I mean, this is like the human being is literally designed so that like we cry and like blush to give away our emotional vulnerability so we communicate with other people because we're social. We're a social creature. This is beyond it's the stripping away of the isms and the ideology and the insanity that anyone could think it's okay for another person to be starving or to be a slave.
There is a phenomenally strong sense of community at the nation state level here in Finland. I have not seen anything like it. I'm learning a lot just by living here. Anyway,
I mean, we
moving on
can
to
argue a
slide
big
Those
part of that
those
is because
damn
of,
commies got you brainwashed.
yeah. I mean, I would say a big part of that is because of the fact that there's very little income inequality compared to like the nations of America or England. You know.
They've had serious poverty here. They faced some very serious problems, like in 1939, the Russians had a serious go at trying to invade the place. They never, ever, ever fell off the wagon and fell into despair, and they didn't fall into organized crime like other parts of the post-Soviet bloc. They held their pride all the way through, and now they're actually quite wealthy.
What
and
happened to the
structured.
universal basic income program they had? Didn't they have that?
They did. They did. They also did it in the Netherlands for a bit, and they proved that it worked. The idea worked, but that they had a lot of economic migrants coming in
Oh,
from
well,
North
okay.
Africa, Morocco in particular, and so many people turned up and they wanted to game the
There
system,
you go.
and they overwhelmed the local system because they wanted access to the medical system and all that, and it all crashed.
So I like just a note on universal basic services. I think I love the idea that it goes both ways. That you receive, and there's pilot projects. I got this guy I talked to once in England, and they're doing this. This is happening. That there's universal childcare, healthcare, food, housing, transportation, and maybe even a couple more, and that's just guaranteed. And you can't, like with UBI, the capitalists could just increase the prices, etc. There's all these ways that UBI just doesn't really solve the problem. But I like the idea that with universal basic service, it's something that we contribute as well. We're universally, in service to each other, and we're actually contributing to those systems because those systems are made of us and our labor and our will and science and capacity and our shared resource. So we're all contributing to the system, and there's all these incentives for us to contribute, and then we get back way more than we give.
There's two things that are important to make that work long term. One, everything has to be in balance, right? You can't have too many people sort of coming. We can't have a city of, say, 10,000 people, but 500,000 people turn up on our front lawn because they think it's a cool place, but don't want to take part of society, but they wanted the outcomes. The second thing is it has to be by consent, as in everyone interacts with this system by consent. We're not being forced into doing something we don't want to do.
I was going to say, so there's a direct incentive for those people at the city level to make sure that if there are economic migrants coming in from a particular region, they're like, okay, we need to help make sure they're okay. We need to help make sure that they have a good
True.
system.
How many people live? How many people live in South America, the continent of South America, versus let's say our little 10,000 person city off in one corner, and we're the first. So while we're very, very small and we're surrounded by millions of people, or tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people that are in economic poverty, don't understand what it takes to actually build such a society, but they want that moolah.
A lot of people with eco-villages in South America, there's kind of two kinds. There's the neo-colonial kind where they just kind of come in and they will they'll pay the people, the locals, to like serve them, and they're basically just exploiting their cheap labor, and they're not really forming relationships, and that's it's literally dangerous. And then there's the second kind where they make really intentional relationships with the local people. They're working with them, they're sharing their resources, they're sharing their knowledge, and those are they function better. And so the people of South America are, in my experience, they're not spoiled like we are. They are very communally valuable. They value community and contribution. They are great quick learners. They are hard workers. They are some of the greatest human resources on this planet. And so if this kind of city is constructed in a place like South America, then we will be surrounded by people that will very rapidly adapt in ways that we can make them collaborators in spreading this and increasing the spread of what we can do, not just creating our own.
But you've got to do that, though. You've got to actually build the society before people sort of see it. Now, if we've got a small little city of 10,000 people, but you've got the city of Lima with like 10 million people up the road, right? And it says, hang on, everyone in Lima is poor, but there's this shining city in the sun where the highest quality healthcare in the world. Like, you want to take your kid to the dentist? Oh, we can't afford it here, but if you go down there, well, and then they sort of turn up on our doorstep, right? I want to use the dentist. Also, bad actors that want to destabilize the settlement will actually send floods of
Of
people
course,
in
they will.
to overwhelm it.
I mean, yeah.
So what we're talking about here is, where does the money come from? If we're going to have all systems in so we're going to set up a settlement. The organization that runs that settlement will own the buildings and put up the power systems. Okay, great. But there's operational costs, and everyone has to get paid a wage. Where does that money come from? So this is an innovation hub, and we make stuff. We make cool stuff, and we're sourcing resources from unconventional sources. So there's three basic paths to make money. The whole city operates, well, there's been a whole series of operations in the city that make stuff. We're an innovation hub, so there'll be IP flowing off this innovation hub, some of which will be commercialized, some of which will be given away, some of which will be kept confidential. For example, how to run a nuclear reactor should probably stay confidential. We will be engineering production of unusual products, for example, graphene or hemp. We can make things out of hemp, grow hemp, make hemp, blah, 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 all the stuff that could come from that. We'll have a 3D printing facility that can actually make stuff and so on. So we'll be making unusual engineering products which can go out for sale to the outside world. We are also sourcing unorthodox sourcing of commodities, for example, turning piles of rubber tires into fuel oil diesel. Once we've built the city, we could be running a bus fleet or a trucking fleet to go out to all other communities until we can get our hydrogen technology stable. So you've got three kinds of ways of making money. All of that goes into revenue. That revenue goes back to the city for the operational costs to run the city and associated operations. Everyone's wage, that's where that comes from. Whatever flows over the top of that gets returned to investors in a form of royalty. When we actually go out and ask for capital to actually build this city, we want to raise between 5 and 10 billion if we were to do everything. We don't know what we're going to be allowed to do. We've got a lower end of 1 billion and an upper quartile of 10 billion. That's a lot of money. Two kinds of investors. One is the legacy investor that actually wants their family name associated with developing the next era of human industrialization technology. They want to fix the world. There is a lot of money out there that knows that the existing system is in deep shit and is about to break apart in ways that really cannot be fixed. What I'm asking for, a couple of billion, is actually small change compared to many of the other projects that are out there. The other kind of investor is someone who is happy to wait. They want to change the world, they want to develop new technology, and they understand that this world has to develop the tools for the next world, and there's a transitionary period. When you're actually producing stuff, 10, 20 years after starting, you're going to start producing stuff. It goes to market, it's sales. Once you've actually sort of got your operating costs of your city running, royalties come back to those investors. So those two investment strategies to raise the capital, and we're going to create a society where the people in that society don't need money to live, but they still get paid a wage. Everything still operates normally. The running of those basic institutions and everything has nothing to do with governance, and it has nothing to do with any idea of tax. And so this is the idea that within the city, we are having a series of steps that will take us to a full moneyless society without, but we can still interact with the rest of the world while it's still going nuts.
And I would say it's like you have your city, and then around it you have this, wild nature and lands and, little townships and things like that. And you have these people that you probably want to, they're curious about what's happening. And if they are curious in the wrong ways, they could potentially be threatening. And so the way to, I think about, like, I was talking to this dude the other day, he's got a poacher problem. And I was telling him, like, well, he's got his rainforest in Costa Rica. He's a white guy, rich family. And I was like, well, what if you took your poachers and just put them on the payroll as wild animal protectors? Nobody knows the forest better than them. nobody can protect these animals, knows how to find and protect animals and put trail cams and things like that better than poachers. And he said, absolutely, they're the best. They're the best. And so it's basically like you have the central hub, and then you have these distributed threads that come out into, more low tech, more rustic sort of like eco villages that are developed with the local people that help with the agricultural production and other sort of light manufacturing and other things that give the people there a job and gives them an ability to make a wage, but they're also contributing to your community, and they're starting to immerse and become sort of a distributed sort of mycelial part of the larger city. And so instead of like thinking the less people we have, the stronger we are, it's like if we figure out the interaction pattern and the governance and the ownership and the filtration, the membranes of interaction, the more people in that network, I think the stronger it could be. So we're creating a ripple effect that we're spreading consciousness through meeting needs. And you have people and they're in this fucking frenzy of fear and anxiety that is the market system, that is scarcity. And we're able to start meeting their needs and kind of showing them and healing them and helping them. And that brings them on board and it makes them allies in a way that's much more powerful than any, phony populist despot who says, we're going to kick out the immigrants, or we're going to do this, or we're going to make America great again.
Well, that's why the U.S. government said the Black Panthers free breakfast program is like a huge threat to the U.S. empire, something like along those lines.
That's when it's when we start meeting the needs of people that the governments and the corporations can't do it. That's when we will become extremely threatening.
One of the risks to this operation, let's say we set up in South America like we hope, the drug cartels are operating in South America. And how do we prevent them from setting up shop in our city and doing horrible things to our society?
Put them on the payroll.
Now,
well, first ask the U.S. First, ask the American banks to stop funding them. That's one good way to do it. I mean, that's really Bank of America, stop funding.
So in practical terms, a solution that this is in a SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. Right. So. The idea is to actually make it impractical for them to do that. And the way to do that is to randomly pick some sort of law enforcement official randomly from all over South America, pay for their transportation costs to come and visit the city and do a tour and do like an inspection. And so what that means is law enforcement is regularly coming into the city and looking at stuff. So if you want to set up a cocaine production and smuggling operation in this city because it's cool, understand that police from all over South America are coming through here and will inspect your shed. And they say, and they also don't know who, because we're going to randomly pick stuff from all over the continent. So they can't go and find the person and bribe them.
But also, I mean, the drug cartels are only doing that for a reason. They want to meet their basic life needs. They're trying to survive financially. If we can present them with a vision that, hey, you could actually put all that stuff aside and work with us, cooperate in our project, and that will meet your needs. Also, they might just want to give it up.
If I can butt in for a second, a little known fact, believe it or not, we spoke to somebody from Peru some time ago, and he was telling us a story about a case where the cartels were smuggling guns or drugs or something through the Amazon, and they encountered some of the indigenous people there, and they had injured or killed some of those indigenous people at a certain point, and this created a paranoia and a fear among the indigenous people towards outsiders. And apparently, at a certain point, that process continued, and the cartels continued to try to go through the Amazon. And the indigenous people, they got together, they rounded it up, and they eliminated the cartel.
Yeah, that's
moving through that
that's
region.
what the Zapatistas did. I mean, they armed up, they kicked out the neoliberals, and they kicked out the drug cartels, and they policed themselves. They are, very successful at keeping out imperialists and opportunists.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because you got machine guns versus basically bow and arrows. That was this case, but they know the forest, right? They know the environment.
Well, that's the whole thing of dual power. Dual power is not just about educating and preventing harm, but also to a certain degree, if you have to, defend yourself physically. Self-defense, yeah.
So this is an example of industrial permaculture while generating energy. The site that I want to work on is by the sea It's also has almost no rainfall, so it's very dry. We need to be able to source energy, and we need to be able to source drinking water in a way where we're not taking resources from the locals. My plan is this: park a thorium molten salt reactor on the land, take water from the seawater. When you're heating that water with heat from the reactor to generate steam to turn the turbine, what you've done is desalinated that water. You stripped all this water out. And so you end up with a brine, like a very, very high salt content liquid called brine. The steam goes to the turbine, turns the turbine. You get your electricity. What do you do with the steam when it's done? Wow. Desalinated water. Pump that steam uphill. The site we're looking at is quite steep. It's by the sea, but it actually it rises up into the mountains, like quite steeply. Hot things want to rise, so steam will be easy to pump uphill with very little energy. In fact, it may actually require very little energy at all. Collect that steam in a reservoir up at altitude. It cools. It cools into water. That, boys and girls, is our drinking water. Add a mineral balance, because this is now demineralized water, so that water is now useful for living things. And then irrigate, when that water's cool enough, irrigate it back downhill into the areas that we want to green the desert and feed the city of its drinking water. We take the water first, we drink it. Then we also take the water that goes into the grey water system. The grey water system outcomes that gets fed into the black water system. The black water system is then captured and turned into pyrolysis. Right, so now we've actually got fresh water from the sea while we are actually generating electricity.
So a word on water, that there's really so much beautiful regenesis happening in the permacultural agroecological fields around water. There's a great video by Andrew Millison on the water cup in India, which some actor put up a competition to see which village could keep the most water in their system. And there's all kinds of very simple, dummy simple, like Mollison said, as our problems get more complex, the solutions are embarrassingly simple. Like just digging berms, just digging little half moons that fill with vegetation because they're cooler, and then that creates more precipitation, that creates microclimates. So things like restorative grazing, like cattle grazing, they move when they're managed, holistic management of livestock can go through desertified systems, and they deposit their fuel, their waste, into the system, and they scratch up the soil, and there's methanotropes in the microbes and in their soils, and basically it increases the surface area of plant life. It begins to regreen the desert. And there's a great clip in Common Ground, the sequel to The Kiss the Ground, where they're in the Sonoran Desert in Mexico, and he goes through once with his cows, comes back a year later, there's 6-foot grass, and it's raining. So you can literally bring rain to the desert because you increase plant life. The plant life one stores more water in the roots and in the soil, and then it transpires through transpiration, which one creates this kind of layer of condensation or precipitation in the lower atmosphere. And this is what John Liu told me, that it's the biggest cause of climate change, or one of the biggest, is liquid water, is H2O in the higher atmosphere, and we need to keep it in the lower atmosphere. And the more plant life we have, it creates this kind of insulating layer that absorbs methane and carbon and other things, and it creates a microclimate. And so we could regreen that desert, like just bringing in the best biological minds of our time, working with the indigenous peoples of the area. We could have more water than we know what to do with. And like the indigenous peoples of those regions before, they had incredible systems of irrigation where water's like flowing down these rivulets and pooling here where it needs to go, and they're using it to turn wheels, and there's just so much we can do naturally.
Right, but one of the things is to actually map and terraform the site, and actually sort of make a series of drainage patterns that marry into the natural permaculture of the watershed. And part of the thing is to put in what's called swales. Swales, which are actually sort of to catch the water and prevent it from running off. However, the site that I'm looking at happens to be desert that gets about 40 millimeters of water a year, and that is the case for 300 or 400 kilometers in every direction. There is no rainfall. So we want to green the desert. Yes, you can do some of it, but we don't need just a bit of water. We need enough water for 10,000 people to live there and have industrial sites and green the desert. Right. So we take the brine. Now the salty part of the sea. Now when they desalinate plants at the moment, what they do is they just dump the salt straight back in the sea, and that causes untold harm to the local marine environment because it becomes very salty. Then they got the idea of, put her in a ship, take it out to sea, and dump it deep in the sea. And it says, well, why don't we do the following? Take the brine, put it into a solar still, use the sun to finish the job to evaporate the rest of the water out. You know how they often say things like, there's lithium in water, in seawater. We've got all the lithium in the world, it's in seawater. How much seawater do you have to process to actually strip out a kilogram of lithium? They won't answer me on that one, but electrochemically strip out all metals out of the seawater. There is actually trace elements of everything. Then you're left with salt, which is sodium chloride. Strip out the sodium, strip out the chlorine. Both of those can be used to make batteries. What I'm saying is we could be have a battery making production facility that actually is making batteries from sodium and chlorine from seawater. So there's actually nothing left. There's a tiny, tiny fraction of mass left. We're taking stuff from the sea and we're consuming all things, and there's actually a natural balance and no waste plume. Move to slide 104. You're getting the short version.
Yeah, wait till this is fully developed. It's going to be slide 1326.
You think I'm kidding? Yeah, this is how 1,000-page reports happen.
Yep. That's how it is.
Hey, well, there's a 900-page report for Project 2025 about basically bringing us back into like the Middle Ages. Like we need that. We need that for the good system.
Their crap. Yeah.
What's that called?
Project 2025
Oh yeah, you don't know. You heard of it?
That's the Trump.
Horrible.
That's the covert, like Christo-fascist, hyper-conservative, right-wing Trump term.
What you're looking at here, microwaving of sulfur-rich industrial waste. A friend of mine was working with the European Space Agency. They wanted to develop a source of oxygen and water on the moon. The way they were doing it was they were microwaving rocks to the point where oxygen, the bonds that hold oxygen in the lattice, break apart and pure oxygen comes off the rock. What is left is the rock breaks apart and globules of metal form. So you can take a bit of basalt or granite, which is like 40% oxygen, microwave the shit out of it, like say for 30 minutes, and you end up with a chemically broken apart rock with globules of iron, aluminium, silicon in pure globules, and lots of them. What this means is, instead of actually getting your metal from a mine in the middle of nowhere, you can go outside and pick a rock off the street and get metal from that. Okay, so it uses a relatively low amount of energy, and there's a weird relationship with sulfur. Sulfur acts as an accelerant. Move to slide 125.
And then one quick thing, is this the metal for infrastructure? What are we using this metal for?
This metal can be used for anything. Right, so move to slide 125. This is how this stuff would be used. Imagine this as follows. We go out to a place like there's a smelter in the northern part of South America. It's one of the most polluted places on Earth. The material that comes out of this smelter is seriously toxic. The toxins happen to be all the metals like iron, cadmium, nickel, zinc, copper, all the stuff we want, but it causes acid mine drainage. Get paid to take away their waste. Take it to our city site. Put it in one of these systems that's either a microwave system or a plasma system that actually breaks apart the rock so pure oxygen comes off. Keep that pure oxygen for a later task. Put it into a pilot scale leaching system and then put it through what's called membrane separation to extract out in one step all the different metals. We now have a source of lots and lots and lots of metals like copper and zinc and aluminium and silicon. Put that into a plasma furnace to make very, very high quality fine powder. We've now got the feedstock for 3D printing. The feedstock is of metals of all kinds. That 3D printing system could then be making anything you can think of in various different combinations of the metals that we are sourcing. So imagine, if you will, one shed. Industrial waste goes in one end, commercially useful products come out the other end. We've just collapsed the 6-continent just-in-time supply grid into a single shed. Right, so the implications of that we can talk about at length, right? Because then you could actually do various combinations of this. But this is how I was going to suggest, without actually moving very far from the city at all, we can now source a lot of our raw materials that are in a useful form that can be then used in manufacture by doing things differently.
I always feel like whenever I think about you, Simon, you know, in the movie The Avengers, there's that line where they're like, we've got a blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, we've got a Hulk. And then Hulk comes in and starts smashing everybody around. I think about you like that. Like you're you're a heavy lifter. You know, you're like a demolitions expert. You have put so much, not just vision, because I know 100 wankers who can spout off a vision of a techno, you know, ecologically sound, you know, protopia that works for all life. But you've done the really hard work to just fine tune how to do it in an industrial sense, and you've closed that loop fully, hopefully. Well, not fully yet, and I know until it's over, of not thinking about the real economy of the world, which is how the physical things come together to make the things that make us alive. Like that's a very dumb way of saying it, but it's like that's what the economy is. It's not, you know, inflation and you know, consumer demand and all of these, you know, abstract market nonsense. It's how does the world work and what does it take for us to meet our needs? And it seems like you've really created the most exhaustively, expansively 3+ hours of even rushing through huge sections of it, exhaustive plan to do that. And now the problem becomes, the hard problem becomes, how do we proliferate this thinking, connect with the stakeholders and visionaries and people that we need to make it happen, get the resources to do it, and science the shit out of it. Make it a reality. Take it from the blueprint or a slide deck or a vision or the models that people like Fresco work so hard on, and bring it into the real world.
So Zachary, those were very kind words about Simon, but I should also remind you that not only everything you said, he does this in his spare time.
So,
but also to you guys' credit, he's not. None of us is. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, you know. And there's so many people, including people in this call, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Roxanne, who have been doing this for decades.
Yep,
they've
inspired a whole generation.
So, one of my critics called me a baby James Bond villain.
Yeah, that's great. The Rubik's Cube is helping.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. But it's something to fiddle with, and after a while, you actually end up solving it.
And so, by the way, just going back on point, what about? Would you talk about the information system and the? Okay.
Do you want me to do that now?
Manage. I mean, up to you. The information management system.
Yeah, I can do that. Let me find it. So what I was going to...
you know, we have to manage the information, don't we? So.
Yep. So go to slide 137.
That's where I'm at.
Okay. So incidentally, what I recommend, a project management plan of how do we get from here to there has been developed. It's actually on this slide deck. I recommend that if we get time, we come back and we have another presentation where we expressly go through how are you going to go from where we are now, what steps do you go along the way, and how do you actually put some practical results on the ground. And that's actually my training as a corporate project manager. So on the slide 137, you are seeing the resource balanced economy. So the first couple of points there, resource accounting, management of dynamic equilibrium, strategic design, where we actually things are designed to be recycled and things are actually designed to be long-term useful, and biophysical signature metrics. That's actually the resource-based economy. The following 4 points under it are my contribution, where we're putting energy terms now to all actions. 1, statistical entropy coupled with material flow analysis for each resource. Do things get more complicated? And is this a good idea? Next one, an energy exergy or emergy, that's Howard Odum, term developed for all physical actions. As this is the data. Instead of using market price to say this is why we should do something or not, now we're actually going to use energy. Point 3, a technological application evolution de-evolution map over time. As technology comes in and replaces old stuff, all that stuff's resources, both coming in and going out, we need to manage that instead of just doing it by accident. So develop an information management system. So these are actually the physical structures on the ground. We've got a multi-tiered data management system that's actually collecting some very, very complicated stuff and doing things with it. We need a standalone power backup. Wi-Fi. One of the things I actually want to do is actually have a system with as little electronic smog as possible, because that actually directly impacts the ability for things to grow. So no Wi-Fi. Can we have computers running through cables? Can we have mobile phones going on to analog? That sort of thing. And this is actually the insights of the Nikola Tesla stuff about living things being interacting with electronic smog. Have a big-ass satellite that links directly to a satellite array. We are downloading data ourselves from satellites. We are not even remotely dependent on anything infrastructure around us. And we've got standalone server banks in a multiple tiered structure. We're all designed to reduce electronic smog, no Wi-Fi. Yeah, okay, been through all that. Okay, slide.
Real quick, one more thing about Holochain is it's distributed edge computing. And so instead of centralized servers where all of the whole chain of all the information is stored in one place, it's stored in the devices. And each device has a portion of the chain of your own transactions, of your own data and information. And basically, in the old system, if there's more users added to it, you need a bigger server. Whereas in the new way of doing things in the distributed way, the more devices you have in the system, the more capacity the system has, and the better it gets at handling it.
So the purpose of this slide was for defense space. How do we defend against cyber attack? How do we make sure our data is backed up and its integrity is clean? That's really sort of around that. Yes, there's all sorts of technical ways to to do it. Now, this is actually a map I put together. How do these systems work? You've got a series of systems maps. Like, how do you go from raw copper ore we've dug up out of the ground to a block of pure copper? How do we do that? And there's a series of steps. It's a system. That system has got to go through your thermal entropy and your energy steps and all that. So that's the first systems map, and that's up the very top, the top green. The bottom green is, well, once we've got like a smelted piece of metal, how do we turn that into a computer? So how do we actually take these materials and stitch it into a useful product? The first one's Technology Unit Application Systems map. That is, how does society use a computer? So that's a systems interaction. Well, we use it this way, and it needs these things like electricity, and after a while it breaks down. And all right, and then the bottom one is our evolution interaction map, where we manage new technology coming in and old stuff coming out. In the middle, we've got our decision-making system. So we've got a hierarchy of needs, a hierarchy of needs, a paradigm of needs, and legislation. So we've got to decide what we want and how we want. Now, you guys know all this sort of stuff in terms of the resource balanced economy, but this is actually the mechanics of where you actually put it. And in that, you've got a material characterization system, so we can tell what's actually happening where. Some sort of tracking system. Now, I've used the word blockchain, but as you pointed out, there's other technology variants. And the third one is a decision-making system that can collect the information and make a decision of what to do with that information fast enough to be useful. If we were to use pure technology, just pure technology to make the best possible decision at all, we just get an AI to run it, the whole thing. The problem is society at the moment will not trust AI because of how it's being used and how it's being developed. It's being weaponized. So it's a technology that society has to learn how to understand itself and learn to trust. My compromise is as follows. What you're seeing there is a picture of a mine site that instead of actually sort of a mine site where things are sort of run and managed out in the pit, you've now got all technology flowing to an information center, and decisions are made in that information center, and that information sent out to the pit manager. You've got someone sitting at a computer, or several people with several computers with a vast amount of information coming at them, and then deciding what to do with it. Collection of measurements on what resources are consumed and approximately how. So this will be done with blockchain or something else, managed with AI tools, but they'll be overseen by people. So you're going to have people deciding what to do and how, and making judgments and making sure checks and balances go through. So we're not talking Skynet here. So this has to be in place to the point where society has to trust and understand that this stuff's okay and it does work, and then you can actually sort of let go of some of the more redundant older systems.
We talked about this stuff in the Liminal Village episode as well, community-based AIs.
Yeah.
Really, AI is just collective intelligence systems, and they can be configured in any number of ways.
Okay, but the community has to be able to trust this system, right? And they have to understand it, and actually sort of understand it where they can actually sign over their livelihood to it.
The system I think we're talking about here isn't creating an intelligent machine that it's going to make decisions for us. It's basically scraping our data, our language, the preferences that we say we're giving up this data, this information here, and then it's a sense-making algorithm or LLM or whatever other kind of sense-making system is used to make sense of that massive pool of data, and then allow us to interact with it and allow us to program agents to basically automate that information, to create algorithms, to create flows and connect us with what we need, and then to be able to interact with it directly. You could have your little village AI, your neighborhood AI, and you can communicate with all the data there, with as far as who has what in a sharing economy and all these other things, your stocks, your flows, your yields, your needs, and then that could sort of scale up, and then an agent could be created out of that data that can then go and interact with the other neighborhoods, and then it continues to scale up in this fractal, hexagonally sort of scaling way, where you have sense making across multiple scales. But it's not, and this is a key principle. And you talked about that ism. One of the big points is a holonic system, and a holon is a part that contains the whole. And so we're talking about fractally scaling systems. We're not talking about one blanket of this is the way we do all of these different things in all these different areas. It's scaled to the bioregion, to the local neighborhood, to the community, to the council, to the city, to our project. And those scales zoom up into confederal sort of points that contain each whole.
Yeah, I mean, the machines are not doing everything for us. The machines are amplifiers and facilitators of our interest, of what, they express to the highest degree what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So, that's one way to just remove all the boogeyman scare, fear of technology that people have of AI. It's not the AI that's the problem. It's the market-based incentive behind the AI that's the problem.
What we are after is actually tracking of resources, not people. What we really want to know is how much resources are being consumed and what kind. So, at the local supermarket level, what's the stock take? Over time, what products are brought in and what products are consumed and taken away? Put that up against the number of people who live in the area. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to be surveilling individual people. The whole paradigm behind the current system that's being pushed in Europe at the moment is lining up for all the dystopian stuff that everyone's afraid of. And that is getting people to be very afraid of technology. The technology itself is not the problem. It's the wankers who are actually trying to put this out, who are actually trying to use it. They're talking about coercive control of large groups of population where human rights are just thrown out the window. And so this is actually what we need to step past. Even if they stopped it now, enough people see that this is what was attempted, that we shouldn't trust this stuff. So we've got to get to a point where people can trust the system, that it is actually worth doing. And they're not actually lining themselves up for a very, very unfortunate society by allowing it to happen. And that's the fear. And that's what we need to get past. And unfortunately, it is not superstition, but it's actually policy. And so we need to fix this. So we need to have a system that steps beyond that and around that in a way where people don't feel like they're being thrown under the bus. And terms like eugenics as a management system.
No, I mean, that's where the education has to come in, the educational teams and projects of communication to make them understand the value shift. And why do we even have corruption at the highest levels of bureaucratic control in today's society? Why do we have the corruption? People need to understand those things. So education, but also if we're actually helping them in their life, mutual aid programs, things of that nature, meeting their needs, they're more likely to trust us.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to create a society where what we want, what we need, and what we do come into alignment and become the same thing. Well, at the moment, everything's out of alignment, which leads us to where we are.
This is a beautiful vision, and this is a deeply curtailed version of a much larger and more complex and in-depth plan. And I think this idea of us coming together and planning and coordinating and proliferating this information and this perspective, this vision, this worldview, till it gets ever more real is the crucial mission of all of our movements. And to bring activism as we know it from calling out problems into the space of calling out solutions and calling us out to take the responsibility that we have to build this. We have to develop it. We have to design it. We have to plan it. We have to know how to govern it. We have to think through every fucking detail and not just think, some revolution is going to happen and this is going to be worked out. No, we have to do that. And
Well, someone's got to do it. And the activism, like you said, like it's really three-tiered. The educational component of reaching out to the world, communicating with them, the vital message. Second, like what Simon talks about, the innovation, putting together design projects of actually how to do the out system design concepts. And then three, which I think is often not talked about, I mean, this needs to be addressed, the activism component of putting pressure on the established structure to minimize the harm that's being done. Because we have to engage in harm reduction. So, I mean, all those three things are important. And obviously, we're all engaged in it in all different avenues. My part is mostly the educational component of reaching out to people and informing them. But Simon is doing the very important part of
and check out Arjank's channel, World Beyond Capitalism, for excellent education in that.
Thank you. I appreciate
for me,
it.
the next point here, and something I'm excited to help participate in, is the bringing together of councils and finding those people. At every bullet point, there's an expert. There's somebody out there who's already doing it. And to start bringing those people together through the umbrella of all of our different organizations in cooperation, in federation, and bringing us into this process collaboratively, because it's way too big for any of us to do.
Bringing them together under the umbrella of a common worldview. I mean, that's really what's so important, for them to understand that we have a shared worldview.
And one of the multipolar traps that I was kind of alluding to earlier that are all negative things is like all these new paradigm groups and thinkers and Gaia this and new paradigm that, a lot of them are like, have a lot of the same visions, they have a lot of the same plans, but a lot of them have this sort of thought like, oh, well, we're going to be the first one to get there and then all the others are going to follow. And I've talked to so many of them like, oh yeah, we're totally open to collaborating, ... when the others get it together. And so it's the unification, or not so much unification, because that, I think, for most people implies centralization. The federation of our efforts into a common body is crucial, is essential. And so this is a great start. Not a start, it's not even finished. We're going to continue this. We're going to continue working with Nate, with Roxanne, with Simon, with Arjank, and with many more people as we bring this conversation ever closer into reality. So thank you guys so much for the show. Thank you, listeners, for bearing with us for this really long, beautiful conversation. I hope that we sparked so many people's ideas to be like, oh, I want to help with that. I want to help with that. And, reach out and get involved, and let's do it. Let's fucking do it.
Let's make this conversation a normality. Let's make it a common normality to be talking about these solutions and transitionary concepts.
Well, as a closing remark on Prometheus Nexus as a project, there will be a website. So it'll be promethean.thevenusproject.com, where people can go sign up for announcements, and it'll be built out more and more as time goes on. So that'll be the next thing coming up for people that want to get involved or want to help in this particular project.
And get involved with Moneyless Society, and we'll meet you wherever you're at. And let's take steps to this from literally every angle, every institution, every socioeconomic background. Everybody has a part to play in this. This is a global shift. Even to produce a local community, a local iteration of a new society at all of these scales that's capable of producing a cell phone, you know, it's going to take a global effort of people from all over.
I want to really want to thank Simon for your time and your expertise, and hopefully we do other discussions on this and elaborate on the nuances of the details. And hey, if it's fair, we have Simon and Roxanne give us a send off, because you know they're the ones who have been the heroes. So
I I think I want to mention, as Nate usually says, and you can refine this, Nate, that what we're really trying to do is build an arc. And as things falling apart, we will go and build this arc somewhere. And as Simon usually says, come back 10 years later. I don't know how long later, but as soon as we can show the world as we're developing it that there is an alternative, is what we'd like to do.
And for me, in closing,
absolutely.
Hulk smash.
Hell yeah, brother. Thank you so much, Simon. You're one of the greats. And
Absolutely.
we'll keep it going.
Okay.
Get
All right,
out there
everybody.
and do it, listeners.
Bye.
Adios.